My first experience at the Royal Court was my first day in England when I came here to go to drama school from the States, from New York, in 1966. And the Royal Court was already a myth to me, having studied theatre, and that's where I decided to go. I literally came off the plane and found a B&B down the King's Road, and went past the Royal Court and bought a ticket. It was a revival of the Knack. It was March 1966, and I sat in the last row balcony, and I experienced the Royal Court, and it was always something very important in my imagination. And I know in my dreams I wanted to work here. And it was 20 years later, in 1985, nearly 20 years later, that I got my first job at the Royal Court, which is as director of the Young People's Theatre. A very, essential part of my life. I've seen a lot of game-changing plays in 30 years. But I know I have to pick one, and I think I need to pick an international play. I feel that made a big change, and that was a play called Plasticine by Vasily Sigarev, directed by Dominic Cook, and I think it was done in the theatre upstairs in 2002. He was a writer we worked with in Russia. We had just, we were in the first 5 years or even less of doing international work. And I think he was just so unexpected. He was such a force. He had so much to say about the times he was living in what was then post-perestroika Russia. And he wrote in the most original voice we'd ever heard. So original that a lot of people said, well, it's a film script. And we said, no, it's theatre. Dominic wanted to direct it. He was an associate. And I remember Ian Rickson saying, well, we can do it for 2 weeks without decor. And we turned out doing a proper run with full decor directed by Ian McNeill, designed by Ian McNeill in a kind of promenade, extraordinary promenade performance. It was controversial. It was... It was insightful into a society we knew very little about, and it was successful. It won the Evening Standard Award for Most Promising Playwright, and I think that was the first time a foreign writer who'd written in Russia, translated by Sacha Dugdale, but it was the first time that an international writer had made that breakthrough in recent years. And I think he went on, we did 3 of his plays, but I think his experiments with form were very influential on our British writers as well. I think we really have an immediate response to the times we live in. And I think there are no barriers to that, to the kind of explorations we can do and the kind of work that we can put on. There's no fear about that, and there never has been in all of the 60 years. And in half of that time where I've worked there, I've just seen risk and adventure and failure and success, happen all the time, but you never can predict it. There'll never, ever be, every play is the first time you go through that process. The original thoughts of George Devine, which was hard-hitting, original, provocative, contemporary work. I say that wherever we go in the world doing international work, because that hasn't changed. And I think by the very nature of that, there's constant change and there's constant adventure. And I suppose for the work that I do internationally, I'd love to be able to have the resources to produce not just international, but to be able to produce more. We have so many amazing writers, so many incredible plays to be done. I'd love to see another space and another possibility for producing more work. The very beginning of the international department, producing work in 1997, and we did 3 plays. They were the first international plays we produced, a French and a German and Spanish play, and we did them at the Ambassadors. It was the years we were rebuilding Sloane Square, so we had two theatres, the Duke of York's and the Ambassadors, and no one came. I mean, 20 people in the audience. No one was interested in international work. No one wanted to see these plays, and I was absolutely desperate. And the Weir was playing the Conor McPherson play down the road at the Duke of York's with queues of returns queues. Nobody could get a ticket to see it. So in the end, I went to the return queues and I begged people. I said, "You're never going to get a ticket for this. Come down the road and see these plays for free." And that, in contrast, I always tell the story wherever we go to say, now we do an international play, The Royal Court, even an international reading, and it's booked out before we've even hardly announced it. And the way that's changed, the way our audiences have changed, and the way the work has grown, I think, I always like to look back to begging people to come in for free. It's absolutely been an essential ingredient of my life for the last 30 years. It's all my thinking, so many of my friendships, so many of my relationships with people around the world are all based on the life that I've had. And what a great, great privilege that's been. And so it's very difficult to imagine my own life without the Royal Court.